As a co-chair of organizing committee, we welcome you back. Yesterday, we have an exciting day, with keynote speeches from Tencent, AirAsia, Grab, Facebook, and also corporates like SIA, Huawei, and Bayer. For this session, which is brought to you by Modern Aging team, co-created by NUS Enterprise and Access Health International, a program that is the only one in Singapore, which is an accelerator program, 4-year-old now, addressing the needs, the topics that will connect technologies and innovative solutions to help with the seniors. And this is really important because today we are forced to be reckoned with. We have 1,800 strong community of modern agers to help with the seniors. We have received 200 submissions over the last 3 years and seeded at least 8 of them. Every year in innovfest Unbound, we pick a topic. And this year, we want to start a new conversation to inspire the community to dare to dream with the modern aging community. We chose smart wear for active aging. The purpose is to have the audience understand the latest work being done in the field of wearable sensors from various sectors and representative countries around the world. In the recent years, we have seen seniors using different type of sensors in sports, in rehabilitations, as well as their workplaces. Today, we'd like to address how it can impact the lives of the modern agers. In innovfest, we always want to address business opportunities that startups can work on so that commercializations of technologies is important. We like to hear the market size, how to start, how to do it, who to partner. So these are important questions which will provide insights into the exciting world of wearables today. We are pleased to have an international panel comprising of Prof. John. He's from Cornell University. He's here with his wife, Daisy. We welcome you to Singapore for the 7th time. We also have Prof. Benjamin T. He's from NUS, Dr. Mariel from Yonsei University, as well as Abhishek, who is now pitching in another room, so he'll come in very, very soon to represent the view of a startup. I shall now like to invite the moderator who lead this panel with the topic, and his name is Wang. Wang is the director of Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities at the Singapore University of Technology and Design. He also heads up the Smart Cities Lab at LKY-CIC. His current focus is in smart cities, digital economies, digital societies, digital transformation, and the future of work in education and healthcare. So, Wang, please.
Thank you, Kelvin, and thank you all of you for coming to this session today. This is a very interesting session, and I say that not just because of the topic, but because I actually know 3 out of the 4 panel members, and I know them quite well. And I can tell you that they are very interesting, and you will see why as I introduce each of them later. This is one of those topics where I think you don't hear about it a lot, but it's going to be a big area. You don't hear about it a lot because there's a lot of deep science and deep tech materials, etc. involved. And so what we hope to do today in today's session is to have these 4 experts give you a very good overview of what's coming over the horizon. And once you know what's going to come over the horizon, hopefully they'll give you some ideas about what are the opportunities that you can seize in the course of your work that you do back at home. Let's get started. We've got 4 members today. The first to present is actually Dr. Marie Che Yongjin. She's a visiting researcher at the Institute of Symbiotic Life Tech at Yonsei University. She's a research scientist in technology-intensive design and for functional garments and wearable electronics. She looks at smart clothing, innovative textiles. And the one thing that may not be apparent when you read her bio in the program that you may have on your mobile phone is she's got a PhD in engineering, but she started out life as a fashion designer. So it's one of those things where you marry both the cultural, the social, the fashion, the lifestyle with the technical. And I think that's going to become increasingly important. Just for transparency, I also worked with Marie on a project for about 2 years that was funded by the National Research Foundation that culminated in the book Living Digital 2040, Future of Work, Education and Healthcare. So maybe let me invite Marie to come on stage and to share with us her thoughts.
Thank you, Wang, for introducing me, and thank you, Access Health and US Enterprise for giving me opportunity to share about wearable clothing or smart clothing in the future for healthcare. Hi, my name is Youngjun Shea, and today I would like to share a topic about future of smart clothing in healthcare in this session of smart wear for active aging. Briefly introducing myself, I'm a PhD in textile science. Sorry, this pointer is not working. Yeah. Yep. I have a PhD in textile science and engineering, but most likely I would like to introduce myself as a design scientist because I like to play along the ideas between innovative materials and creative design solutions. My research area includes innovative textiles, wearable electronics, and functional garments. These are the two outstanding works that has been shared in and out of Singapore. First is the solar textile with a very flexible and light material that can be easily added into wearable electronics for all-day use of the wearable devices. It's good because it's also seen for a higher efficiency with a different type of color variation. Secondly, but not the least, based on the 2 years of work that I have done with Wang and SUTD, we have recently published a book, Living Digital 2040, which covers the area of future education, work, and healthcare, which is a big theme of today. Okay, now we have to think about our topic. Aging. What is aging? Aging is being newly defined these days. We can think it is no longer a passive movement of life, but is more to do about a disease that could be overcome or cured by time with advanced technology. So, active aging can be persuaded, and it is really happening since we prepare for a confident lifetime. So this scheme shows what we have been doing with the 2 years of a study for future of cities that includes the area of future education, healthcare, and work. We have interviewed and we have spoken to more than 174 participants, and among that, we have found some valuable outcomes that we can share with you today. The findings had led us to 2 following workshops, which we have titled under the Wearables for Future Healthcare, which is very relevant to today's topic. Okay, we all know that the future healthcare is something to do about telemedicine or home care or the mobility of the patient and being smart. But more than that, during our research, we have found out although we have the abundance of technology per se in the future, we are still keen to have a human touch, which means we want to support ourselves by supporting others, so to be called empowered by human. And another important fact that we have found is it's not only the patient or the seniors who are aging, we have another very important group who are aging, who are the caregivers. And they have to support the active aging population who actually might get obese by time. So, about the future wearables in healthcare, are we talking about something like a super intelligent and strong clothes like Iron Man? Or something like an exoskeleton? To find more about this and to find the answer about this curiosity, we have formed our first wearable workshop during our project, and we asked more about what the practical ideas and the reach points may be in the future for healthcare by talking with material experts and designers and engineers and also healthcare entrepreneurs. here we found an interesting fact that, okay, we know that the technology is doing something for us in the future, but it's not only to do about the intelligence and the strongness of the figure. More than that, people were more interested and thought that the empathy and the understanding of the user needs and the wearer needs, including the aging population, should be the number one to be figured before talking about anything else. So, as a platform for the future wearables and smart suit, we have found that the clothing can be a good physical environment to make this alternatively happen, because clothing naturally gives a very personal space to the wearer within its closest environment, where the wearer can feel very confident and natural to control all the devices or play around with the devices with sufficient privacy. Based on these issues, we have launched a second wearable workshop to focus more about smart clothing per se by understanding the facts that I have mentioned just now. Here, we have invited two different groups. First, the caregivers, and the second, the care receivers. Here, an interesting fact was also being found that it's not only the difference between caregivers or the receivers. Both were so happy to hear or were fond of the technology, what they can bring and what changes they can make in the future for the healthcare. But more than that, they still thought that the technology should be seamlessly hidden inside the garment, even for the caregivers. They didn't want to show that something looking very uncomfortable is supporting them, and which meaning that they are needed for certain kind of support to live their daily lives. So people wanted something seamless, natural, with confidence. So now I'm trying to share a simple mock-up based on what we have found and what I have just shared just now about what can be practically in the market in few years. So the video that you have seen just now shows a simple clothing, but not really simple because technology is everywhere. But still, we can say it's simple because it looks pretty much natural to what we wear these days. So the very important part of this clothing is that it doesn't really look like a health-providing device or health-supporting clothing per se, but it looks pretty much natural. And that these ideas are based on the real existing technology these days. All I did was to combine based on better wearer experience and wearer comfortable issues. So here, all the different factors can be still discussed, but the main feature of this clothing is to provide sufficient thermal and moisture comfort to the wearer. So all different parts of the clothing interact to each other, including sensoring part and the computing part and the actuating part. But this main feature of the thermal moisture comfort for the physiological, psychological comfort can be also added or replaced to other comfort factors such as the physical comfort that most of the caregiver needs these days. So once a sense is being, or data has been sensed by the garment, it's not waiting for someone to actually interpret the data for you. You're not waiting for someone to do it for you. The clothing actually reacts to your body condition by also considering the outside condition, which is the surrounding environment. This is the second prototype that I would like to share. Okay, although we're talking about healthcare and healthcare supporting devices, we have to acknowledge that we are talking about a 24-hour service a day, since wearables should be worn on the wearer for a longer time of a period. So always the battery may be the problem. Here, my Apple Watch is not turning on because I didn't charge anything today, right? Same for there. Even though we work for healthcare providing services, we still have to think about what type of sufficient power source can be help helping this function to work. So based on my findings and my patient about flexible solar textiles with multicolors and super light, I have combined these ideas with the layer of different clothing that can also sense the different conditions of the wearer and their environment. So the overall condition that I have shared so far in the prototypes is now telling us we have to consider about the user comfort and the wearer comfort, and the clothing can be the best part of it. And for this, the clothing is not only for a large platform to put on the different devices in a flexible surface area. It's about a tangible media that interprets different language between the human and the environment. So, current technology provides us many things or shows us many things about wearables, but still it's rich, small, and uncomfortable, and some functions are limited. Now, wearables and smart wears and smart clothing is looking for major shifts, including large, being flexible and comfortable and unlimited. So again, the wearables has to be newly defined, and also smart wears and clothing should be newly defined. It should be considered as a tangible media between the human and the environment, including other people. So I found out 3 C's that is very initially important for smart clothing and healthcare. First, it should provide sufficiently comfortness to the wearer, and also the wearer has to be in his usual mood, natural mood, with confidence. And also all the different parts and sensors or actuators or the servicing devices on top of the clothing that is seamlessly integrated into a textile garment should be well connected. And this connectivity is also to do about what the garment actually does between the wearer and the environment and their social life. So there are many things to be covered in smart wear in healthcare. But many people are still talking about different languages because, like Wang in this speech, we need a moderator for this. So I hope you stay connected and integrated, and if you have any concerns about this, please feel free to email me at fm.che. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie. Just a small admin note before I proceed to the next speaker. I've got instructions from the tech support team behind that for everyone who's using this later, please point it backwards because I think the sensor is behind. And if it takes a while to load, just be patient, right? So some things we've not worked out yet in the tech support side, we will work it out from a human standpoint. Thank you very much, Marie, for that very interesting conversation. I think what she brought to the table was a discussion not just about how technology can be human-centric, but really taking the idea of human centricity one step further to include very human values such as empathy and connection. And many a times, I don't think we talk enough about that in technology. So let's move to the next speaker. The next speaker is somebody I enjoy talking a lot to, Professor Juan Hinestroza. He's a US Fulbright scholar. He's a tenured associate professor at Cornell University. And interestingly, he directs the Textiles Nanotechnology Laboratory at the College of Human Ecology. He's a material scientist, but he's gone over to the dark side, maybe, right, to look at functional fibers, smart textiles. And he's got very wonderful work in multifunctional fibers, and also a lot of interesting perspectives about how to marry the technology and the human, and to bring about, similar to what I mentioned earlier, fashion designers, technologists, social scientists, and humanists together in the same room to come out with very interesting solutions that will make life better for everyone. So if I might invite Professor Juan Hinestroza.
Okay, thank you to everybody who was very kind to invite me to Singapore. I actually took the longest flight from the US to Singapore, and I'm going back tomorrow, so I'm always happy to be here. I was asked to participate in this panel, and I was thinking maybe I should talk about the technology that we developed to develop sensors from cotton, from textile fibers, but I decided to change the topic, towards the classes that I actually been teaching for 10 years. So I'm teaching a class, a service learning class, in which I have students who are between 18 and 22, and we invite seniors from the community that are between 64 and 81. So I call my class from 18 to 81. And the idea of this class is, as you know, the baby boomers in the US are reaching, at this moment, reaching between 54 and 72. And they will become 25% of the population of the US in the next 15 years. Not only will they will become a bigger market, a bigger proportion of the population, almost to 24% of the population, but also this population will become very diverse. For the first time, the senior citizens of our country will have a very diverse pool to choose from. So we want to prepare our students for that reality. And I'm going to show you some of the examples of the things that we do in our class. So this is just my publicity. I come from Cornell University. Anybody from Cornell here? No? Okay. Yay! One person. Okay. So this is our small town in Ithaca, New York. And this particular department where I work with is a very different department. It's a half science and half designers. So I have to interact with scientists, and I have to interact with social scientists and fashion designers. And that unique combination has allowed us to come with solutions and prepare our students for a very different world, a world in which they are required to work with people who are different, who have different skills. And this is something that most of us were never educated for. But this is the reality of today. The big solutions, the big innovation will come from this joining of fields that we apparently think they are disconnected, but they are not. So the class I teach is a senior level class. It attracts fashion designers, scientists, marketing, and engineering. I've been teaching this class for 11 years. And involves seniors from the community of Ithaca, which is a very good place to retire if you want to retire. So we have plenty of seniors. And the idea is that we want to cover new materials, new innovations for the seniors, but at the same time, make the students aware of the demographic changes in the US. And the students will get direct feedback from the seniors. And what we learn, as Marie mentioned, is that sometimes the best innovation, the most advanced processors, the most advanced sensors are not the solution to the problems that the seniors face. And very few times we ask the seniors, what do you need? Yeah? So we actually bring them to class and put them in the same room with the students. And at the beginning, they start arguing because they have some difficulties understanding the seniors, that the seniors don't have Twitter, for example, or don't have emails. And the seniors complain that the young people talk too fast, and they are more concerned about their phones than the class. I'm sure people in Singapore don't face that, yeah? But at the end of the class, at the end of the 16 weeks, it's fascinating to see how they started to become a team and develop empathy, yeah? So I do remember in one class, a student says, well, I don't like to work with senior citizens because when they are driving, they drive like this, yeah? And then in the class, we teach them how your body changes, how your center of mass changes, and how your eyes becomes cloudy in the front, so you have to look through the side when you get older. And when they become aware of those situations, they have more empathy towards the people. So I'm going to show you some examples of what we do. So first, we invite them to class. We tell them, tell us how is your day? What do you do every day? Identify what is the challenge of your day. Then they learn about biomechanics. The students propose the solutions. And then this is the part I like, because they come with the solutions, they present to the seniors, and then the seniors tell them, this doesn't work. I don't like this. This makes me look ugly. I don't want to wear this. And then this feedback directly from the seniors, they have a new changes, and they come with the final solution. So I'm going to give you some examples because I have very few minutes here. So this is a person, her name is Margaret. This senior has an issue that she falls quite often. So the students were talking to her, and the doctor actually asked her to wear a helmet. And then she didn't want to wear a helmet because she looked ugly with a helmet. So they came with this idea of making a seat belt that will be activated when there is a sudden movement that indicates that the person is falling. So it's pretty much close to an airbag that prevents the person from falling. And then the idea is to minimize the amount of fractures on falling. So this is another one. This is a senior citizen that lost his leg, and because of diabetes. So he comes to my class in a wheelchair and tells the students what happens to when you have high concentrations of blood and high blood pressure. And so she lost her leg and then decided to, the students develop a new sock. And in the sock, there is information about the pressure of the feet. There are also information about circulation, and then communicate to the person, because very, very few of us, I think very few, can actually see what's happening underneath your feet, yeah? And then your feet and your hands are not as prepared to address some infections or diseases as best as other parts of the body. This one is a senior citizen that have a problem with the spasticity, so the sudden movements. And because of that, you cannot control the movements of your arms. So the students decided to work on using this movement to generate energy and create a sleeve that will control and provide the feedback so the arm will not move as a person with Parkinson's or any other type of disease. This is one of my favorites. It's a person on a wheelchair, and her husband came to the class. Unfortunately, that person passed away during the class. And that was it's a very interesting reaction of the students. They wanted to do something for that particular person. And then they asked the wife, says, what's the most difficult thing that you have to experience? And she mentioned the most difficult thing was to put clothing on him. And then she was also, they decided to make a jacket that will go on a wheelchair, that instead of a normal jacket that you put this way, you actually put like a basketball team, and then you assemble on the side. This is another one, also a person in a wheelchair, and then she complained that even though we have the American with Disabilities Act, that she has access to all the buildings, she always had difficulties addressing people that were taller than her. So she wanted to have some level of dignity being hired. So they work with the wheelchair that can go higher. And I think these are the same words that Mary was mentioning: dignity, comfort, autonomy, and empowerment. Yeah? Just because you are old, just because you are a senior citizen, doesn't mean that you don't want to look good, that you want to feel dignity, or you want to feel comfortable or autonomous as well. This is another one. This is a person that has an incontinence issue. So they have to go to the bathroom quite often. So they decided to, instead of having these diapers, the diapers will be part of your clothing. So then you have these super absorbent polymers that will absorb, and then you can replace these inserts whenever you need them, and that will be giving them more freedom and more dignity. This is another case in which we have a helmet, and then decided to make a helmet for a person that falls, but in this case, instead of being a rigid helmet, it will be a helmet with a shear thickening material that will become rigid upon impact. Yeah, so it's not flexible. This is one of my favorite ones. Her name is Ree. And Ree is a fascinating person because she loved to walk around Ithaca, but there are so many forests, so she used to get lost a lot. And then they have to call the police to find Ree. Yeah? And after you call many times the police to try to find her because she has Alzheimer's, she doesn't remember her name, she doesn't remember where she lives. The police kind of recognize her as many times, but now you can have GPS sensors and ways to communicate directly to the police or where exactly Ree is. And then they can call her family to pick her up. And that's Ree. And this is one of also my favorite. I have, this is an 81-year-old senior citizen. And she has issues with comfort of shoes. So when you get older, your center of balance changes. So it's very difficult to find shoes that will fit you. very difficult to find shoes that are comfortable. It prevents your mobility. And the doctor gave him some of the orthopedic shoes that make it look pretty bad. And she was a ballerina when she was 18. There was no way she was going to wear those ugly shoes. So the students worked with her to develop shoes that would look good, according to her. They will not look different, and address all the issues of comfort and dignity as well. Another one here for a walker that can fold to become a chair. And this is one of my favorite ones. This is a person that could not bend to put his pants. So he could not make this movement. So the students decided to make a little robot in which they have the pants. I think this is the laser, yeah. They put the pants here the night before, and then the person only has to get inside, and then the robot puts the pants up, yeah? So all these solutions, this is another one for a person with arthritis that gives you massage. All these solutions come from the interaction between the seniors and the students. And usually, this is the part that sometimes we miss in technology, is this empathy to understand directly the voice of the customer. We are designing for 24% of the population of a country, but we don't ask them what they want, yeah? And also, we found that the seniors really love to come to class. They even love to come to class more than the students. Mostly because they have very few things to do, but they also feel valuable. And this is very important. Senior citizens have a humongous amount of experience, humongous amount of knowledge that doesn't matter how much Google you have, how much Facebook, how much artificial intelligence you can get, you cannot get that knowledge. You have to live that experience. And this is the best way to communicate to the younger generations. How was life before Facebook? How was life before Google Maps? Yeah? How was life before many of the things that we take for granted today? And this process of communication inspires the students, and they become more connected to the reality, more connected to the market, and also gain skills that usually students don't get in a class. So we've been doing that for 11 years. We have many, many, many more examples, but I'm going to stop here. And I want to say thank you, and I'll be more than happy to discuss with you some of that. The next step for this class is we do the fundraising. So basically what you guys are doing here with the startups, the students come with ideas, try to get the money, prototype, and then launch their own startup companies. And they feel that they have learned something, they have a body of knowledge that they have learned, and at the same time they can generate income, generate technology, generate knowledge, and serve the community. And I've been talking about this for many years, and they always ask me, why are you teaching this class this way? And I tell them, I teach this class because I'm very selfish. I want these problems to be solved before I become old. Yeah. That's my goal. So with that, I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to let the next speakers to give the talks. Thank you very much.
Juan, I want to be just as selfish as you if I'm allowed to. And maybe the other question is, how do we sign up for your class? And maybe one day you can bring your class to Singapore. So a big part of Juan's discussion was really about the human values, human touch, and we'll touch a little bit more on that during our Q&A. But the other major theme was, how do you get different people to work together? And the next speaker is somebody who's in the thick of action doing that, because he's involved in the startup. He's got to work with lots of people. And this person is Dr. Benjamin T. Interestingly, I got to know Benjamin when he was very young researcher, very earnest. I always thought he would do very well, and he's proven me correct many, many times over, right? So he's not just a great researcher and scholar. He's currently the President's Assistant Professor in Material Science in the Engineering Department at the National University of Singapore. That's a pretty remarkable achievement. He got his PhD from Stanford, and he was selected as a Global Innovation Fellow of the Singapore-Stanford Biodesign Program. And I think that's also another major one. And if that is not enough, right, he is also an MIT TR35 innovator and a 2017 NRF Research Fellow. So he's doing a startup now, shuttling back and forth between Singapore and the US, and he just told me that his company's work has just been given FDA clearance. So maybe if I invite Benjamin to come up to share a little bit more about his work.
Hi, Kwan, thank you for this really very kind introduction. It was more than 10 years ago when I first met you, and you were such a great mentor to me. And we still exchange emails, so I'm really thankful for your mentorship. So, very good morning. I'm Benjamin T. from National University of Singapore. And it's a great pleasure to be here, and really would like to thank Kelvin and his team for putting this very interesting event that closely touches many of our lives at some point. And actually, and Kwan mentioned that I started a company. My co-founder is actually right behind. If you want to, he's a CEO now, so if you want to find out more about the company, you can talk to him. So just a quick background, besides getting my degrees overseas, I think Singapore is such on a fantastic growth trajectory. I've spent some experience in big companies, big tech companies, big med tech companies, and now I've gone through the, the hurdles of launching our own startup, raising funds, and so on. And I really like to thank the many people that have worked with, the brilliant people who really allowed all these achievements to happen. So we are talking about wearables technology today, right? And just a quick show of hands, how many of you do not have a smartphone in your pocket? Okay, maybe I'll ask you why later. But actually, if you look at computers and computing technology, intelligent machines, they have changed dramatically over the last 50 years or so, right? From mainframe computers that take up the space of this whole room to now a smartwatch that can almost pretty much do everything that this big computer can last time, right? And it's still evolving, and we are really witnessing a lot of change in how we use and interface with technology and devices. And in the last decade or so, there have been a lot of interest in looking at how we can change further the format of computing devices. And there's a lot of interesting work exploring stretchable formats, plastics, and so on. And we can now make devices that can even put on skin. And I think, and many of the earlier speakers have mentioned, where we will see further integration of technology and electronics, I think really be in textiles, right? Because it's something that we pretty much wear every day. We may not wear a smartwatch, we may not carry our smartphones, but we're going to wear clothes. And I think that's where there's a lot of intimacy and a lot of interesting aspects that we can start to think about how we can fully integrate technology for the betterment of society and hopefully reduce a lot of these healthcare burdens. So at the same time, what has very interesting has happened since the dot-com bubble bust is that there's this growth of internet infrastructure. We now have this term called IoT, or Internet of Things, where we now start to have fully connected human beings, right? If you look at the internet penetration rates of countries by countries, and the world average is roughly about 50%, right? So we're not too bad, slightly more than 50%, and it's still growing very rapidly. If you look at the West definitely leads, with US having 90% of the population using the internet on a daily basis. In Asia, South Asia, and East Asia, we are doing okay. We're catching up. But if you look at that, the numbers tell you a very fantastic story, because it means there's tremendous opportunities for internet companies, device companies to really take advantage of the trend of connecting human beings together, right? And of course, Professor Kwan mentioned that the children of today will be very different, and he's building technologies for himself. I think the world is changing very quickly. If you look at myself, I grew up without internet, and then suddenly there was internet. I had pages, and then there was an iPhone, and it was Nokia before that, and so on. So there was really a lot of change, and this change is accelerating, right? But there's one thing that's pretty much for sure that is going to happen, and that is aging. We are all going to age. It's something that we cannot stop yet, maybe at some point, but I don't think it'll be so soon where we can prevent aging altogether. And if there's this certainty, what's also certain with aging is that there is disease, right? Aging, unfortunately, we gain a lot of strength, a lot of wisdom, but unfortunately it also comes with price. The price to pay is disease. And we really need to think about how we can manage disease. And if you look at the types of disease that we should look at, just simple ranking of diseases in Singapore, because it's closer to home, you look at the top 5 diseases that we are experiencing due to age. Number 1 is ischemic heart disease, followed by diabetes, stroke, vision disorders, and Alzheimer's. What about the West? In the West, we are seeing very similar trends. Again, cardiovascular diseases are very high. Hypertension is, of course, #1 in US because of the high obesity rates and high cholesterol and arthritis. Prof. Kwan mentioned that as a possible technology to look at. And last is diabetes, but I think it will start to change as the population ages further. So if you look at just the top 2 diseases that, we can't tackle all the problems, but we can tackle some problems. The top 2 will be cardiovascular diseases followed by diabetes, right? This is going to be where a lot of opportunities are going to happen, a lot of technology is going to come to address this, because there's a lot of other space besides disease treatment. There's also prevention and so on that can really allow scientists, researchers, and doctors to work together. So in terms of disease management, right, usually it starts with knowing a problem. You diagnose, you have a disease, you have a heart condition or whatever, and then the doctor prescribes some treatment, right? This is going to happen no matter what. Any disease is going to follow this kind of life cycle, right? And the goal for medical profession or technology, I think, or wearable technology would be to achieve a disease-free zone, right? To bring us all to a state where we have no disease. And how can we do that, right? I think earlier diagnosis will really help, because then we can find out disease earlier before it can happen. We can prevent disease or even predict they're going to have heart attack and so on, right? And I'm very interested to look at technologies that can do that. So one of the trends I've mentioned is that electronics are moving from rigid components like the smartphones and watches that you're holding to flexible formats. And one of the things I've previously done is actually we can make sensors on very stretchable format like a smart bandage, right? We can embed a lot of intelligence in this sensor device that you can put on the wrist or anywhere on your body. And it can actually measure, if you put it on the wrist, track very fast in real time your pulse waveform that's coming from the radial artery, right? And in fact, it can actually tell you that your arteries are stiff or not based on the shape of these waveforms. And doctors and scientists have looked into this problem, and they call this pulse wave velocity, right? So, this reminded me when I was working on this project in Asia. We go to see the Chinese doctor, and I've seen Chinese doctors many times when I don't really know what's bothering me, but they feel something is wrong, so I go see the doctor. You look at what the first thing most Chinese doctors do would be to apply pressure on your radial artery and detect your pulse. So basically what the Chinese physician or medical profession have learned over the years is that there is a very interesting aspect of using your own sensors to tell you this kind of waveform, right? The doctor is using his own organic neural networks, right? His own human intelligence, not AI, human intelligence, to tell you, oh, maybe there's something wrong, and he can, through training, understand what's happening, right? Or predict that you are maybe you need to take some medicine and you need to exercise more, etc. So this is what we can do with modern technology, right? If we can embed technology that can be put on body, we have much more intimate understanding of your own cardiovascular state. So in fact, when we start to put a lot of technologies on stretchable, flexible form factors that you wear, we need to think about speed. How can we make them communicate really fast so that future AI machines or computer programs can understand, right? We're collecting a lot of data. So to address that, actually, so try not to blink, actually. If you blink, you will miss what I just showed. So this is me putting my finger on the sensor that we developed in NUS. In less than half a second, the signal's gone, right? So I have to actually slow it down by 10 times for you to actually see what's happening. So if you touch something, this is what's happening, right? Your skin sensors are actually responding very quickly, telling your brain immediately what's happening, right? So we have developed now a very high-speed network that allows sensors on a large scale to be integrated, right? This is actually the world's fastest technology available to date. And the problem with technology is that we are actually way ahead of traditional medical profession. If you look at the pulse wave velocity, which I mentioned as an indicator of arterial stiffness, they take 25 years. In fact, this was just approved by the American Heart Association, by doctors who say that yes, pulse wave velocity is a good measure for arterial stiffness. This took them 25 years. But I think the trend will start to accelerate if we work closely with medical professions, and I think that's what we need to do. And through the biodesign program, that's what we do, right? We look at problems, work with clinicians to come up with technology. And this is something that I think if we really want to develop technologies that people use, we need to understand and apply. So the goal of any modern technology for wearable devices, at least to me, I think is really, instead of increasing lifespan, we want to increase healthy lifespan or health span, right? And I think that's critical, and there are opportunities that we can look at, sensor technology. So I'm also building search engines that for engineers and other people interested to design sensors that they want of any sensitivity, any size. NUS also have a large effort to look at spinning out some of this technology. CT-LIM has a FlexoSense where they made a soft stretchable sensor. Once you have all these sensors, you're going to collect a lot of data, and we need to work with computer scientists to understand this data and hopefully reach a state where we can predict you're going to have a heart attack maybe months before that happens, right? And the goal of all these technology, wearable technology, is really to bring healthcare closer to home, where we hopefully in the future minimize visits to the hospitals, right? Doctors are overstretched, we all know that. And I think if we can have intelligent machines, intelligent clothing in homes, that would be very interesting. And on top of that, since this is also a Smart Nation initiative, Smart City infrastructure is critical. You need to be able to transfer all this data to doctors safely, securely. You know that it's not going to get hacked. It's a big concern, and we need to have standards for wearable technologies, whether it's clothing, watches, etc. We need to start really coming out with a standard, and Apple is leading the way by now opening up their health kit to more developers, right? I think this is going to happen. The trend is showing us the way, and we need to work with these technologies. So I think, like Professor Wan, I'm also pretty selfish. A lot of the technologies I'm developing now, I hope I can use. And I think when I watched Robot and Frank, it was a really amazing movie where you can have robots. They are very human-like, take care of ourselves, right? Take care and cook for us and understand our health state. I think that if we put wearable sensors on us, we can eventually move them to robotic agents that can work in our homes to take care of us. So I'm Benjamin T, and I'm working on human-inspired sensory systems by combining a multidisciplinary approach and through what I call the ring of engineering, not one ring to rule them all, but the ring of engineering to really combine knowledge from different domains. Thank all my funding agencies for believing in some of the work that we are doing. Thank you very much.
So one of the things that's happening in healthcare is you start to hear this a lot, that we used to focus a lot on adding years to our life. I think increasingly these technologies suggest that what we need to do is also add life to our years, even as we get older. So another person who's working on these same things, also working on a startup, is Abhishek Agarwal, who is our fourth speaker. He's a passionate entrepreneur and innovator with over 5 years of experience. He's working on projects involving implantable medical devices and sensor design. And he really is bringing his deep experience working on the high-precision manufacturing sector, where he built monitoring solutions for companies like Boeing and Foxconn. He has a joint master's in biomedical engineering from NTU, as well as the Birla Institute of Technology and Science in Pilani. Right, so Abhishek, all yours.
Hello. All right. Hi. Thank you for your time today and for listening to me. So I'm going to talk more in the context of the work that my company is doing, unlike other speakers who have a great understanding of the industry and where the trends are going and what kind of technologies are available out there for smart wear. So we work in the area of orthopedic monitoring, so especially related to musculoskeletal disorders. And what we are seeing more and more in this industry is basically the state of the art, which is, implants are now being fit with sensors and going inside the body with active energy requiring sensors that are implanted inside a human's body and monitored subsequently. Today, what I'm going to talk about is more on the preventive side, that the impact of these wearable technologies is not just from the point of view of when the patient goes through a procedure and then there's a recovery period and he's wearing some sensors to monitor for monitoring progress, but it's also from the point of view of when the problem actually starts. So I did my master's in biomedical engineering from NTU. I had, as Mr. Tan explained, more than 5 years of engineering experience. And why I picked this particular problem is because for the last 25 years or so, I've seen my own father suffering from an orthopedic problem, a spinal problem, and seen him struggling on a day-to-day basis. And what we started this company with a vision to bring about some kind of a day-to-day relief mechanism that is personal to the patient, that he can access readily, and that he can use to basically shorten his recovery time, improve the day-to-day quality of life, as well as enable faster recovery and better quality care. So we are talking about future of care for joint replacements. To talk about joint replacements themselves, we've got a typical 50, 55 years old person who feels joint pain. It could be in either of the joints. And then he goes for an outpatient visit. Now, during the outpatient visit, he's typically prescribed some medicines, prescription drugs, opioids. And then basically, typically patients would take it from the period where they are feeling pain. They don't do any exercise therapy. They don't do any rehab. And then that leads to osteoarthritis. Now, typically, for best practices scenario, when a person has osteoarthritis, he's recommended weight loss activities, he's recommended physical therapy, he's recommended social and emotional support to help him cope with the condition better. But typically, because of patient's lack of compliance, that results into him, again, not being compliant to the exercise that has been prescribed to him. Now, this research has found that more than 65% of the patients actually don't comply after the osteoarthritis phase goes by to the prescribed exercises, which again results in chronic pain and eventually a surgery. Now, that's where we come in. What we have done is basically, till date, in Kinexus, built a wearable monitoring device to help the patient after the surgery phase. So, talking about total knee replacement surgery itself, about 5% of the global population above 50 years of age, or more than 35 million people, are actually living with a replaced knee right now. And this knee replacement is such a chronic problem that it has almost doubled in the last 2 decades. And you won't believe me, but Australia's government actually spends more on knee replacement implants than they do on baby deliveries. That's how chronic the problem has become. And there'll be more than 100 million people by 2050 actually needing knee replacement. So knee replacement, again, it's a $34 billion global industry right now. And the problem, as I earlier explained, what happens is after a patient is discharged, there's a 3 to 6 months long period during which the patient needs to be continuously monitored. There must be at-home rehab compliance. There must be evidence-recommended physiotherapy that must be delivered to the patient at least twice a week. What actually happens is patients often do exercises poorly or incorrectly, which leads to pain and injury. There is very poor rehab compliance, and there is evidence-recommended manpower physiotherapy that is not delivered to the patient due to manpower limitations. And so what we have done at Kinexus is design this wearable sensor to tackle all of those problems. Now, hospitals currently are using this plastic scale called the goniometer, which is used for measuring progress, and which is a manual and time-intensive method used in outpatient clinics for measuring physiotherapy progress. Then they are also using paper booklets for prescribing exercises at home. This is a very unengaging process and does not often motivate patients to do the exercises correctly at home. So, as I earlier explained, we have built state-of-the-art wearable devices that are used to collect high-precision clinical data from the patients, patients' mobile application for rehab education, progress monitoring, and teleconsultations, and a clinician's dashboard to monitor patients' progress. This wearable sensor, unlike other wearable sensors out there in the market, have the capability to continuously monitor the patient and gel with the wearable, with the garments that he's wearing on a day-to-day basis. So this sensor is a knee joint, multi-axis knee joint sensor, which is used on a patient's knee for continuous monitoring, a clinician's mobile application, which is used for measuring the patient's progress during acute inpatient and outpatient therapy sessions. Okay. Now, what we are looking to achieve with this kind of a wearable technology is basically improved compliance. So by promoting compliance, we actually want to reduce the recovery time. We want to improve patient compliance, that is up to 75%, and we want to improve clinical productivity. So clinicians who now handle about 10 to 12 patients on a daily basis can handle up to 20 to 30% more patients, resulting in the improvement in the productivity of the hospital or the healthcare provider. And this improved productivity can basically also have a revenue impact on the hospitals itself. So in the existing TKR protocol, we've got a surgical procedure, and after between 0 to 3 days, the patient is discharged. During these 0 to 3 days, our device is used for continuous monitoring and patient evaluation during post-operative care. This is followed by manual physiotherapy, during which device is used in outpatient clinics by physiotherapists and while performing at-home rehab. This is again followed by 12 to 20 weeks of manual physiotherapy, range of motion and strengthening exercises, and functional exercises, during which device is used in outpatient clinics by physiotherapists and while performing at-home rehab and teleconsultation by the patients. This, again, patient may want to continue the use of the device to monitor the recovery and training. But we believe that up to 80% of the patients do not receive evidence-based care. There's up to 60% of surgeries are avoidable, and medications are not an effective long-term solution. So this is where the preventive part comes in, that patients, the moment they start feeling pain, that is about 50 to 55 years of age, we basically prescribe exercise therapy, which can delay or eliminate the occurrence of osteoarthritis and the resulting surgery that is needed. And this is made possible by patient education, physical therapy, social support, and the wearable sensor technology that we are using. Thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thank you, Abhishek. So what we're going to do now is we've heard from all four of them, all different views about where the frontiers of smart wearables, smart textiles is going to be. Maybe if I invite all four of them back up onto the stage for a panel discussion, then we can then have a nice Q&A and a conversation with the four of them. Marie, Ben, Juan, and Abhishek. Oh, yes. Yeah. Do they know the... I think there is a Slido or a Q&A software available, but I do not know whether they have the link online. Okay, do we want to show the link for the Q&A session? Okay, maybe while they get that set up, what I like to do is the way I'll do this session is I'll kick off with a question that I have after listening to all of them, and then I will quickly open it up to the audience because you might have questions for them, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us from there. The first question I have is, obviously all four of you are at the cutting edge of what you do, and we've heard quite a bit and quite a lot about what is interesting, what are frontiers, what is cutting edge. And for those of us who are here, obviously we're interested to know where the entire frontier is. So maybe more a question that will help the audience, but also draw on your expertise and your knowledge. What university, city, country, or company should the audience be keeping an eye out for if they want to learn more about this area, and which would be extremely interesting to them? Right. Anyone wants to take a stab?
Okay, so I mean, if you're talking about aging, definitely Japan leads the way, right? They have already a great use case, and there's companies that are starting to look into it, how to bring remote rehabilitation tools. I think Japan will definitely set the stage for others to follow because they are one of the, they have 20, and in one of the cities, they have more than a quarter of the population is above 65. You know, that's really significant. And the challenge with learning from a country like Japan is that there's also a lot of cultural issues that you need to be aware of. So when you use countries as examples, it's important to understand a bit of the nuances of the culture, the type of diet, and whether your technology can really have an impact is dependent a lot on that as well. And anthropology studies should really help to design technologies that actually work in your own environment, your own country.
Yeah, so I also would like to say that becoming old is not a privilege of only a few countries, yeah? So there is a lot of people that in other countries that cannot afford some of these developments, but also their population is becoming older in bigger numbers than the US or in Japan, and those need to be addressed as well. And I think you guys have a couple of neighbors with high populations here, and also looking into China and India as well. And as Benjamin mentioned, there is a cultural aspect of these solutions. There is not a one fits everybody. That particular sector of the population is very sensitive to culture, is very sensitive to what they perceive of themselves as seniors and what's their role are in the society. And those need to be addressed individually. There is not a final solution for everybody. So a senior citizen in China or in Japan will behave completely different and expect something different from society than a senior citizen in the US living in Florida.
Okay, I'll say Singapore, not only because I wrote a book just here in Singapore last year, it's also because Singapore is a place where innovation is happening very quickly and it can be implemented for fast, rapid prototyping and etc. So to see the market experience and what the market is actually wanting in the active aging society, it is very important to have the infrastructure to actually fund this in a very limited time of a year, so actually to make this happen. And Singapore, since they have a lot of good IPs and resources and also a lot of agencies and government agencies, including companies, supporting this area, I think it's a very positive and promising part to, we focus.
For me, it's always more about the market. And being, in Kinexus, we do our trials in China, in Shenzhen, and around that area. And we do see a lot of enthusiasm among not just the young population, but the elderly population as well, to come out, to try out new things. And also, they're very aware about their day-to-day fitness or their health. And from my point of view, if I were to quickly collect a lot of data without too many rules and regulations or without going through too much paperwork, I would go to China, and you've got a ready population out there who's willing to try out new stuff, willing to share information. The government is pushing new technologies, not just from a policy point of view, but from an adoption and an implementation point of view very fast. Singapore, of course, it's a center of excellence. This is where you get your clinical data. This is where you do your studies which are recognized worldwide, and that's why Singapore is attractive. But from a speed and the volume perspective, China is really exciting to me. Yeah.
And I think there's an interesting parallel to what's going on in startups, entrepreneurship, and Ben talked about smart cities, is that increasingly we see that these technologies are general purpose. To some extent, it's a platform, but their cultural, market, as well as environmental circumstances are different for different countries. And perhaps an interesting parallel would be that just as smart cities are starting to form networks, maybe this area needs a network that ties together different cities, different countries, so that you can draw on each other's experiences. And it'd be interesting if that is something that can be done. Any questions from the floor?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay, if you could, yes.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm from Get a Range. We are actually Singapore's first online wheel writing platform. I want to check
Get a range, is it?
Yes. One of the difficulties we face is actually in getting the elderly to adopt new technology. So far, our main solution goes around going towards someone they trust, like for example, their caretaker or their family members. So is there any other solutions around this?
The question is, how do you get the elderly to adopt technologies,
yes.
new technologies? Right.
Thank you.
Any questions? Any responses?
Well, I would like to say that we don't have to believe that they will behave in the same way we behave. Yeah. So just because we depend on the phones and look at them all the time, doesn't mean that the seniors will do the same. But they are looking for solutions. Yeah. If the thing works for them, they will use it. They will develop. They will incorporate it into their lifestyle. If it's becoming something that doesn't look good, doesn't feel good, but it functions, there's a little difficulties there. But at the end, they're pragmatic as well. So usually, as you mentioned, family members, the support system is very important on that. Many of the cases that we have to deal with were originated not only by the seniors, but their family members. They wanted to see where the grandmother was, yeah? That was a challenge to go to the police station every 2 days to find her. But if you can make this experience seamless without having the difficulty, for example, to punch an app, we have a couple seniors that when you get older, your dexterity is very different. So for example, to push a button on the screen, that specific app is very difficult for them, not only visually, but also the coordination with the hand. So some of these apps will need to be customized for some of these issues, but it's possible through software.
Anyone else?
Well, I mean, look, so my parents are started on WhatsApp and I cannot, I have unending streams of messages from them, right? So I think it depends on the age group that you are considering, you know, your target population, and also whether there are support systems that you can work with, right? So I know Singapore has a very interesting program where they have volunteers to going to neighboring neighborhoods to actually teach elderly how to use technology, internet, and so on. So you try to tap on those. And I think Prof. Wang mentioned that there is certain customization, but you know, in general, if you have a startup, you can't have too many solutions, right? So you kind of have to choose the target population, figure out what the pain points are, and then come up with a solution that you think can address that. At the same time, you need to look at the time frame of adoption, right? There's usually, if you're familiar with startup speak, there's always these early adopters, super users. So those will help you find out how to make your app or what solution better. And then once you reach past that stage, you're going to have a slow increase in number of adoptions, right? The more common users. So you know, there is always a time frame to what you're trying to do. So you have to figure out whether your solution can be developed in the time that and resources that you have. You know.
Abhishek, Marie, anything?
Yeah, I think there's a very popular book on this topic, you know, in terms of adoption. There's a book called Traction. I think you should read that book. You know, that pretty much tells you, you know, the pitfalls and then the gaps that, you know, an early stage startup trying to get its first 1,000 users for its product, you know, what pitfalls are there and what are the key strategies that you could, you know, implement to navigate and acquire those early customers. And in Singapore specifically, you know, it's all about simplicity. If what you're proposing to your, you know, I don't know are you a B2B company or a B2C company, but if you're a B2C company, then basically it's all about, you know, the simplicity, you know. So if what you're proposing or what you're putting out there, you know, cuts down the existing workflows and processes that the elderly patient or the customer that you are targeting is implementing on a day-to-day basis, then it works for them. If it does not, then it does not work for them. So essentially, if your product increases the amount of work that they have to do on a day-to-day basis, then basically it's not going to run. But if it cuts them down and it makes it fun as well, so you know, you have a ready market willing to absorb your product.
For me, I think it's very important for the new system or the designers to design the new function in a user-friendly and humor-centered way. Per se, like for a smartphone or even a smartwatch, even my 2-year-old baby know how to, you know, unlock it very fast, even though I don't give her a cell phone like 30 minutes a day, but she knows it already. She knows how to take a, you know, camera, and she knows how to point out everything. So even when a senior, in a similar circumstance, when a senior wants some need, he wants to or she wants to cure some kind of illness, and with need, they will actively learn what the new system and the technology wants to be learned. So like what Professor Wang just said, when there are needs, they will be following the educational system and what is the basic of it. And at the same time, the companies and the startup also have to focus about what are the better way to serve the system in a user-friendly, especially when it comes to a senior way. And I don't think it's a really challenging way because we see what's going on for the smartphone for our small kids. Thank you.
So every time I hear that question, I always say, have you seen that age group play mahjong on the mobile phone? No problem at all. So something to be learned from mahjong. But more importantly, I think something else I want to raise, we, in the center, the Lee Kuan Yew Center, we just did a pilot study of what makes people adopt technologies, because we really wanted to understand what does it mean to be human-centric. We use the word, but I'm not sure we fully understand it. And we actually found that across all age groups, everybody was optimistic about what technology can do for them. So maybe there's something to think about, that maybe we're all optimistic, but we're optimistic in different ways. And so back to what Professor Huan said, maybe we're imposing our view of what technology should do on other age groups, and that's what's causing the problem. So maybe the problem is us, not them, right? So it's just something to think about. Any other questions from the floor? I mean, yeah, okay, one question there. Yes, if I could get a mic over.
Hi, I'm Gwen. So I have
Where are you from?
2 questions. Oh, I'm from EDB.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I have 2 questions. The first one is, aside from what you shared about, cultural challenges and difficulty in consumer adoption of the technology, what other market challenges do you face? Can you hear me? Okay. So what other market challenges do you face that's hindering a faster uptake to such technologies that's built around the elderly? And then the second question is, what kind of business environment do you think that will help encourage more innovation for the silver market?
Did you get the question? So one is, what's stopping the market from adopting this more quickly? And the second question is, what can Singapore do? Right?
I mean, if you look at healthcare products that have a medical indication, definitely you have to get the support of doctors that would be your kind of gateway to the patients who will then use the product. So doctors tend to be the first line of referrals. If you're talking about medical devices, if you're talking about lifestyle changes and so on, those tend to be more fluffy and more difficult to really figure out how can you get access to the population, especially for the aged groups. But actually, I think what's interesting is caretakers are a good gateway. So actually, I think there's previously we did was involved with a hackathon, and we actually had a idea where we had, your caretakers, for example, your parents, right? You're actually keeping track of your parents through a smart app that tells when they have to go for screening, etc. And all these are based on medical guidelines. So these are interesting ways to nudge people to take care of their parents, but before they have no idea how they can do that, now they can do that on an app. So I think that's something interesting that we should look at. Having caretakers, children of aged parents take care of their parents in a very intelligent way, right? They are already used to technology. You don't have to retrain them. So that's a good insight that we got from the exercise. And the other question was about in Singapore.
What can Singapore do?
Singapore is a very unique place. If you look at internet penetration rate, we're actually at the US, we're about 80-90%. So if you can take advantage of this infrastructure where almost everyone is connected, that's probably a good way to go. We actually have very high literacy rates. So actually everybody knows how to use technology in Singapore, right? So if you can harness that and actually start from campus where undergrads, they all get used to your technology, I think that's the way of thinking. A lot of some of the ideas that I have all come from my undergrad days, So undergrad training, graduate training to some extent can help shape adoption of technology. But it does take time, right? You cannot expect change overnight, especially when you're looking at population-based technologies like aged healthcare.
Anyone else? Oh, it's too big a question. Maybe Abhishek, can you say something?
So I've seen one thing specific to adoption, like a lot of things healthcare related, medical device related, especially in the US, like they don't even bother with going to B2B, they just go to B2C, and the awareness is there, the desire to do something for your own benefit if you have a certain medical condition is there in the population, in the US general population. And I've seen a lot of companies in my space that have gone through this route and done extremely well in the US. Whereas in an Asian mindset scenario, I know that that's not going to work. If I were to go B2C, I would totally fail in Asia, because here people are accustomed to being told what to do rather than going out there and trying to find products that would work for their conditions. So I think that's the key difference which I have learned in my journey. And besides, so what, coming to what Dr. Benjamin said is, working with healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, rehab centers, if you're talking about, a certain type of technology that you want to, the patients, particular type of patients to use. So I think that works in Asia, but, the B2C thing doesn't work in Asia. Yeah.
Maybe if Kwan and Marie will allow me, because actually this touches on a conversation we had last year, that perhaps Singapore is in a very good position because it's one of those areas where the ability to integrate different agencies and disciplines is paramount. And so one way to think about it is maybe from a Singapore's perspective, how do you build platforms, loosely speaking, right? Not just platform, right, but really platform in a few areas. What sort of infrastructure is needed? That's one. What sort of research communities do you need to build? And how do you integrate that into what we have in Singapore? Be it healthcare, or in the case of smart fibers and functional fibers, actually their use extends to a lot of other areas as well, including, for example, potentially construction and other many potential applications. So maybe it's more to think about it in those terms. And just as a little tidbit, I think if I'm not wrong, and Juan can confirm this, we have one of the most advanced textile manufacturing facilities in Johor Bahru, right? So that's something to think about, right? That there's something to be thought about, to think through how you bring about so-called this platform. And I just mean platform not in the jargon sense, but really getting people to come together to solve a problem. Okay, any other questions from the floor? We're almost at the end. Maybe if we have any more than one question, anyone else? We can take all the questions at once. One more there, one here. Okay, so we'll take this gentleman first and then gentleman at the back.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Rishi and I'm from Silver Activities. I have a question more towards probably B2C aspect. When we create technologies or apps for elder age, we are actually trying to solve two problems. One, because especially probably it's true in Asian context, that the one who pays is not the one who consumes. So probably the elders who are using our technology, so that means we have to convince them to use our technology, but also have to convince the caregivers or the sons and daughters to pay for it. So how do you normally take care of this particular aspect when we have to, as an early startup with limited resources, take care of both of these issues?
So maybe if I could get a question at the end as well, then we can take both questions together. Sorry, I have to make the mic runner run.
Yeah, hi. My name is PJ. I'm also from EDV. My question is actually quite simple. So for each of you guys, when you were creating your products, you went through a design process. My question is actually that is the knowledge of designing for the elderly sufficient at this point in time, or is there more research that needs to be done in how do you design for the elderly? Is there like a requirement to combine like a geriatrics knowledge with design and in the education as well? So that's my question. Yeah.
Okay, so two questions. Feel free to answer both or answer one, right? So who wants to take a step?
I can address the issue of the design for the elderly. If you want to design for a population, you need to know the population. And you need to talk to that population. And you will be surprised the incredible amount of knowledge that population has. That can give you that. Perhaps we have the best algorithms to get information from the computers, from search, but this is new knowledge. These people are from the 1940s. They were born in times where there were no milk. I have one person that never tasted milk in her life, yeah, because when she was growing up in the Ukraine, there was no milk, yeah, and so these sources of knowledge needs to be captured and needs to be gained into these experiences. And many of the things that I'm looking at, I'm very optimistic, is the design schools are actually now incorporating all these strategies to talking directly to the people and getting to catalog that knowledge. Yeah? So from that, I'm optimistic. I think that Singapore is doing the same. SUTD is one of the examples of this empathy with the user. For the other question about who makes the decision, I think it's a cultural issue. Yeah? In the US, people are very independent. They like to make their own decisions unless they have some type of disease that prevents from that. And you can see the marketing going directly to them. In other cases, you talk to their immediate family or support system, or to the government, yeah? Because the government is also very interested in lowering the cost of maintaining the health of the population. And this population, we have this bias to think that when you are 65, you are no longer useful to society in some cultures, and that's absolutely untrue. So that knowledge cannot disappear. There should be an interface that you can get information from these CEOs who are 60, 70, that solve the crisis, they know how to react. So the government is also interested in getting that knowledge. But again, I'm just a professor, so I don't know about the strategy.
Well, so about the question of who pays. So healthcare is a very interesting and unique industry where everybody wants healthcare but doesn't want to pay for it, right? I mean, same for me. Right? Nobody wants to pay the doctor. But it's a this means actually it's a multi-sided industry. So you have insurance, you have even governments, etc. So you should look into different potential payers, right? Because a lot of the value that you get from a device that can prevent a heart attack 3 months in advance, for example, you can save tremendously on the burden of healthcare on not just the government, the healthcare system, the follow-up visits, and so on. So there's a lot of trickle-down effects, right? So if you have a product that can create a social good that may not be the person experiencing the product will pay for it, somebody else can pay for it. It's just like Google, right? We use Google every day. Who pays for Google? You don't pay Google, right? Advertisers pay Google, right? So that's the kind of mindset you want to think about when you're developing a company and figure out who your payers can be, right? As for the question of working closely with geriatricians, absolutely right. If you want to design products that eventually will have medical indications, you have to work with the doctors. There's no way around it. You have to go through the regulations, and all these are important because you want a product that's safe. So the question is, well, is there a platform for clinicians interested, right? They have to be passionate about it to develop new products. Not every clinician will want to do that, some might. So you need a platform for people to do that and connect and exchange ideas and have certain mechanisms to incentivize them to actually work towards a product that people want to use. And hopefully we can export the technology, right? I think the challenge in Singapore is we have a great platform. Question is, how can we export this technology globally, right? Whether it's Southeast Asia, etc. And those would need much more intricate understanding of the cultural norms in different countries. And that's the challenge Singapore faces, right? We can develop fantastic technology. We have tons of IP. Question is about how do we extract value, and that's through exportation of the technology.
Abhishek, anything?
About the first question, it was about...
Who pays and how does a startup...
I think maybe the ecosystem or the society may be paying in the future if we look into the optimist way, because as we found out, people tend to take care of themselves by taking care of others, which means now we're now only solely interested about their own health caring system, but we also take care of others to make myself or ourselves more healthy enough in the society and even in the future. In that case, it might not, as you say, it might not be the receivers who's paying for the system. It will be the overall, the ecosystem and the society who's going to pay it. And like, as Ben just mentioned, it can be like Google, right? It can be someone else. But it's important when a new ecosystem like that, helping others to help myself, is formed up more solidly in the future healthcare system. Maybe it will be someone that you didn't even meant of paying for your healthcare services. And also for the design part, even though the seniors are not really known to be really, really super active, but they are actually changing because as we said, they are even now being active aging, which means they're adapting new technology in a different and faster way. So there should be a lot of places and the gaps that we should fill on. How about how those seniors or the active aging group react to a different circumstance, including different pace of innovative technologies?
For me, one clear trend that emerges everywhere is healthcare systems, payers, providers, government, everybody is moving towards value-based healthcare, right? So in my space specifically, to give you a specific case, after a certain procedure, there is this 90-day period that the government has prescribed. So earlier, the way the healthcare systems used to work, like, the payers and the providers will keep on providing care for as long as the patients need it. Now what has happened is that the policymakers, the governments, the insurance companies, they've put a limit that, okay, for only up to 90 days, the provider has, the payer has the liability to reimburse, but if the care has to be longer than a certain number of days, then it's basically the provider, the healthcare providers, who have to pay for the costs. So the liability has shifted now, right? So the payers are actually shifting the liability to providers. So if you can come up with something that can actually not just make it 90 days, but 60 days, then the extra 30 days of cost that you're saving for the provider is actually a bonus, right? And that has actually happened in the US. So Medicare came up with the rule and implemented it in 800 hospitals back in 2016. It was proven through some comprehensive programs by the US government, and then it's now been implemented nationwide, at least for the space where I am in. So that's more on the government side, insurance side, provider side, institutional side. On the day-to-day customer side, right, B2C segment, again, it's more about creating stories. So if you've got you are a small startup, you have limited resources, you cannot have 100 customers at once. If you have 5 customers who will use your product for 3 months, and who will give you excellent references, and then you can basically publish those stories, those references on your website and use it for marketing, there you go, there you have a start, right? And that's how, then you get the next 50 customers, and then you get the next 500 customers. So that's how I see it, at least for my company. I hope it helps. Yeah.
So we've come to the end. I've been told to cut several times. So let me just quickly sum up. I think what we are hearing is an exciting new area. We need new models for funding, be it private as well as public. We need new ways of working together, different disciplines, humanists working with technologists. And the last one is, I think we need new ways of learning from each other, especially, for example, about the elderly and what they need versus us. Right, with that, let me ask you and invite you to thank all our panelists. I think they were great in sharing their expertise. And feel free to approach them after that. Thank you very much.